I always thought horror stories were for people who secretly wish their lives were more exciting. I was content with my little apartment, my stable online work, and my predictable days. It was enough. Or so I believed. It all began on a late Wednesday afternoon. Rain fell in delicate sheets outside my window, the kind of rain that lulled the city into a sleepy hum. I was halfway through proofreading a report when my phone lit up with a new message. It was from Nina, a girl I'd met through a friend of a friend months ago at a housewarming party. We'd exchanged social media handles, but never really talked after that. The message surprised me. Hey, random, but I was wondering if you'd like to come to a weekend gathering? A small group, cozy vibes, just some drinks and games at my cousin's old house. Would love to catch up. I hesitated. Something about reconnecting with people always gave me a twist of anxiety. Still, I was aware how isolated I'd become lately, rarely seeing anyone outside of grocery trips. Against my usual instincts, I typed back, "Me. Hey Nina. Sure, sounds fun. When and where?" She replied almost instantly, sending me the address and saying they'd start around 6 p.m. Saturday. Saturday came quickly. I spent an unreasonable amount of time choosing what to wear. Eventually, I settled on my favorite oversized sweater and black jeans. The Uber dropped me off in front of a large, slightly run-down house on the edge of town. It had a kind of antique charm, big bay windows, cracked white paint, an overgrown garden that smelled of wet earth. Nina greeted me at the door with an excited squeal, pulling me into a hug that was a little too tight, her perfume sweet and cloying. Inside, there were about 6 other people. A couple snuggled on the couch, 2 guys playing cards at a low table, and a woman flipping through vinyl records. "Everyone, this is..." Nina started, pausing to look at me with wide eyes as if she'd forgotten my name. "Your name," I offered, feeling heat creep up my neck. "Right, your name. She's a friend, so be nice." I laughed nervously as they all offered smiles or brief nods. Someone handed me a glass of sangria, and soon we were all settled in a loose circle on the floor, chatting about work, travel, silly memes. It felt normal, comforting even, but I couldn't ignore the uneasy prickle under my skin, like how everyone's eyes lingered on me a beat too long, or how they occasionally exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. It must be my social rustiness, I reasoned. I sipped my drink and forced myself to relax. I had no idea that by the end of the night, I would regret ever stepping through that door. The evening carried on in an oddly rhythmic way. Someone put on an old record that crackled with haunting jazz, and the dim lamps cast long, lazy shadows against the wallpaper. I started to ease up. Nina laughed easily, her arm casually draped over my shoulder like we'd been close friends forever. At some point, someone suggested we play a getting to know you game. Everyone groaned good-naturedly, but no one really objected. A guy named Victor shuffled a deck of cards, explaining, "Draw a card, answer a personal question. Harmless, I promise." When it was my turn, I drew a 3 of hearts. Victor's smile twisted slightly. "Ooh, that's most painful memory. Sorry, the deck's cruel." I forced a laugh, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Probably when my dad left. I was 10. Didn't really get over it. A hush settled over the group. Too heavy? But then Nina squeezed my hand, her thumb tracing my palm in slow circles. "That's really brave of you to share," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Her touch lingered too long. I pulled my hand back gently. As the game went on, I tried to pay attention, but I couldn't shake the sensation that they were all studying me and dissecting my expressions, hanging on to every word. When the game finally fizzled out, Nina insisted on giving me a tour of the house. I didn't really want to wander around a creaky old building, but I also didn't want to seem rude. She led me upstairs to a hallway lined with dark wood paneling. Family portraits stared down at us, all older, yellowed photographs. Some of the faces were scratched out. "That's my great-grandmother," Nina said, pointing at one portrait. "She lived here her whole life. Died in that room, actually." She smiled, as if it were a delightful bit of trivia. I managed an awkward chuckle. When she opened the door to one of the bedrooms, the smell hit me first. Something stale, like damp fabric and old breath. The room was cold, too, despite the summer evening. "Do you feel that?" I asked. Nina tilted her head, almost cat-like. "Feel what?" "The draft, or something." She just kept smiling. Old houses have moods, and that's what makes them special. I swallowed hard. My stomach turned. an irrational pulse of fear racing through me. Suddenly, a loud laugh echoed up from downstairs, making me jump. Nina just giggled. "Come on, let's go back. You look like you've seen a ghost." I followed her down, trying to ignore the way my skin prickled with each step. When we rejoined the group, they were all huddled close, speaking in low voices. Their conversation stopped the moment we appeared. Forcing a bright smile, Nina clapped her hands. "All right, who's ready for another drink?" I nodded automatically, but deep down, a cold pit was forming in my gut. Something was wrong here. I just couldn't figure out what. After that odd tour, I found myself clutching a new drink, seated back on the rug with everyone. The conversation picked up again, but it seemed different now. Lower, tighter, as if they were excluding me from some inside joke I wasn't privy to. At one point, the girl who had been flipping through vinyls, her name was Marcy, leaned close to me, her breath warm against my ear. "You really shouldn't have shared that story about your dad," she whispered, her lips barely moving. I froze. "Why not?" I tried to laugh it off, hoping she was just being darkly playful. But she just smiled, eyes unblinking. "It's how they pick." Before I could ask what that meant, Nina swooped in, draping an arm around me. "You okay?" she cooed, voice syrupy sweet. "Yeah, just little dizzy," I muttered. The room felt off-kilter, the shadows seeming to lean toward me. "Let's get some fresh air." She led me toward the front door. Relief washed over me. Maybe I'd just go home, chalk this up to weird vibes and too much wine. But when I reached for the handle, it didn't budge. I jiggled it harder. Nothing. "It's locked," I said, glancing back at Nina. Her face was carefully blank. "Oh, yeah, my cousin locks it from the outside. It's an old security thing." "Don't worry, we'll unlock it later. Come on, let's not make a scene." My pulse stuttered. "Wait, why would it lock from the outside? That's not normal, Nina." "Nina," she just smiled that same unsettling smile. "You worry too much." Trying to stay calm, I drifted back to the group. I checked my phone. No service. Of course, the house was just far enough from town that the signal dropped off. Marcy caught my eye again, almost pitying now. Then she mouthed something. "Run," I swallowed hard. My hands trembled as I set my drink down. "Hey, I think I left something in the car. I'll be right back." I lied, voice bright and casual. Victor raised an eyebrow. "I can go with you." "No, it's fine." I tried to keep smiling. I moved toward the hallway, heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I passed the staircase, the one Nina had led me up earlier, and decided on impulse to try the back of the house instead. Maybe there was a kitchen door. I slipped away as the group erupted in a forced bout of laughter behind me. The corridor was dark, only a single bulb illuminating water-stained wallpaper. My boots made soft, traitorous creaks on the warped floorboards. When I reached what looked like the kitchen, I rushed to the back door. I turned the knob. It was locked too. Panic rose in my throat. I rattled it harder, hoping maybe it was just stuck. Still nothing. That's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped. Nina stood there, framed by the doorway, her silhouette unnervingly calm. "Why are you sneaking off?" she asked, her voice light, almost amused. I tried to play it off. "Just needed some air. It's stuffy." She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine in a way that made my skin crawl. "You know, it doesn't really matter if you figure it out now or later." "Figure what out?" My voice cracked. Nina sighed, almost regretfully. "Most people don't realize until it's too late. But you're sharper than most." I told them you'd be trouble. My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" That same too-wide smile. "Don't fight it, your name. It's just easier if you accept it. Then it doesn't hurt as much." She reached out as if to tuck a stray hair behind my ear, but I jerked back. "Stay away from me," I breathed. Nina's eyes hardened. "Fine, have it your way." Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed from the hall behind her. Victor appeared, followed by Marcy and the couple from the couch. They moved together like a silent, coordinated unit, blocking any way back to the living room. Instinct kicked in. I bolted past Nina, shoving her shoulder hard enough that she stumbled into a side table, sending a lamp crashing to the floor. I didn't look back. I sprinted deeper into the house, through another dark corridor, past rooms that seemed to grow colder and more suffocating. I found myself back at the front door. Desperately, I threw my weight against it, clawed at the lock. Still nothing. My heart slammed painfully in my chest. That's when Marcy's voice floated from behind me. "You can't leave. You were chosen." I whirled around. They were all there, calm, patient, like they were simply waiting for me to exhaust myself. "Chosen for what?" I demanded, breathless. Victor tilted his head, almost curious. "To carry the grief. To make sure the house doesn't take one of us instead. It's a very old arrangement." Nina stepped forward again, her expression soft with twisted affection. "We didn't lie, you know. We really did want you here. You're special. Sensitive. The house likes you." Tears blurred my vision. "You're insane," I whispered. "No," Marcy said almost sadly. "We're survivors. You'll understand soon." Then they all advanced. I stumbled back until my shoulders hit the locked door. My knees nearly gave out. I thought that was it, that they were going to kill me, or worse. But instead, Victor reached out, pressing a cold hand to my forehead. The world seemed to tilt. A heavy buzzing filled my ears, and darkness swallowed me whole. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Damp wood, mildew, and something metallic. My head throbbed. I tried to move, but my wrists were bound behind me with coarse rope, cutting into my skin. Panic surged through me. I was lying on the floor of what looked like a cellar. Stone walls, a dirt floor, tiny slits of windows up near the ceiling that let in thin ribbons of moonlight. I strained against the ropes, wincing as the fibers bit into my wrists. Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced myself to stay quiet. Footsteps above me. Muffled voices. "She'll calm down eventually." Always fights more when they're sensitive. The house feeds off it. I clenched my jaw to stifle a sob. The house feeds off it. What did that even mean? My mind scrambled through every conversation that evening, every lingering stare, every too sweet smile. They were never my friends. This was never a party. A scraping noise jolted me. I twisted around just in time to see a small door in the corner creak open. Nina stepped through, holding a lantern that cast long, twitching shadows on the walls. She crouched beside me, setting the lantern down. Her smile was soft, almost maternal. "You'll be okay soon. It's just the transition that's hard." "What transition?" I choked out. "To make sure the grief binds to you instead of us. This house, it was built on heartbreak, old tragedies. It needs someone new now and then, or it starts taking." Her eyes grew distant, almost mournful. "We lost 3 families that way before we understood the rules." "You're monsters," I whispered. "Maybe." She reached out, brushing sweat-damp hair from my forehead. "But we're alive, and you'll keep us that way." As she stood to leave, something inside me snapped. I twisted my wrists hard against the rope, ignoring the pain, feeling it burn, fray, finally snap. With a cry that was more animal than human, I lunged forward, grabbing the lantern. Nina shrieked and stumbled back. I swung the lantern wildly, flames licking up the glass. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted out. I shoved her aside and bolted for the cellar door, adrenaline drowning out everything else. I crashed through it into a narrow stairwell, then up, up, up until I was back in the kitchen. I didn't stop. I ran straight to the nearest window and grabbed a heavy ceramic bowl from the counter. With a desperate yell, I smashed it through the glass. The window exploded outward. Cold night air rushed in. I didn't think. I just climbed through, feeling shards tear at my sweater and scrape my arms. Then I was outside, stumbling into the overgrown yard. Behind me, I heard shouting. Flashlights stabbed through the dark. I ran anyway, into the trees, sobbing, gasping, every breath tasting like blood and dirt. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get as far away from that house, and them, as possible. I don't know how long I ran. Branches clawed at my face, roots snagged my boots. Every heartbeat felt like it might burst my chest. At some point, I tripped and tumbled down a slope, landing hard in a patch of mud. I lay there, sobbing, waiting for the flashlights to appear over the ridge. But the woods stayed dark and silent. Eventually, I forced myself up and stumbled on, guided by the faint glow of distant streetlights. By the time I reached a narrow road, I was trembling so violently I could barely stand. Headlights appeared. I nearly collapsed into the middle of the lane, waving my arms. The car screeched to a stop, the driver jumping out with wide, alarmed eyes. "Miss, are you okay? What happened?" I couldn't form words. I just fell into his arms, shaking uncontrollably. He helped me into the passenger seat, wrapped a thin blanket from his back seat around my shoulders, and called the police. The hours that followed were a blur of questions. Bright station lights, warm hands pressing tea into mine. They found that old house the next morning. It was empty. No sign of Nina, Victor, or any of the others. The cellar was there, ropes still on the ground, the lantern glass shattered. But the local deputies shook their heads when I insisted they keep searching. That house has a reputation, one older officer told me quietly. Strange things. Folks vanish from there, only to turn up later with no memory. Or not at all. You're lucky. I didn't feel lucky then. I felt violated, haunted, and hollow. Weeks went by. I stayed with my cousin in a cramped apartment across town. She was patient, never pushing me to talk, just letting me heal. Little by little, the nightmares faded. I still jumped at strange creaks, or saw shapes and shadows that weren't there. But I also learned to breathe through the panic, to remind myself I was safe. One rainy afternoon, I took a walk alone for the first time. The air was cool, the sidewalks glossy with puddles. I stopped at a little cafe, ordered a tea, and sat by the window watching drops race down the glass. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like prey. I'd survived. Whatever dark bargain those people had struck, whatever twisted bond they had with that house, I'd escaped it. I was still me, still free. Later, I even found the strength to tell my story. Not everyone believed me. Some thought it was just trauma distorting memories. But that was okay. I knew my truth, and I knew I'd never again ignore the small voice inside that whispered something is wrong. So yes, it was a horror story. But it was also a story of clawing my way back to life, of finding my footing in the daylight again, of knowing that no matter how dark it got, there was always a way out. And somehow, in the tender, quiet mornings that followed, with tea steaming in my hands and the world waking softly outside my window, I found my happy ending.